Good afternoon. Welcome to the Circles USA webinar for January. My name is Kamatara Johnson, and I work with Curriculum and Training in the National Office, and I'm here with Scott Miller, our CEO and founder of Circles USA. And today we are going to be looking back on 2018 and the accomplishments thereof, and looking forward into 2019.
Hi, everyone. This is Scott. Oh, okay, great. But just to give everyone, some people are on that have not heard a little bit about our history, so I want to actually go back and talk about the original intent of Circles USA and then how 2018 fits into that history. We have always felt from the very beginning that we're in the process of encouraging this country to stop normalizing poverty. If you go back to the days when our country used to normalize, for example, the condition of slavery, there was an abolitionist movement that began and went on for numbers of decades before it had what was needed to get to critical mass, and we stopped legalizing the practice of slavery. It's taken another huge amount of time to begin addressing the cultural norms about slavery. And with regards to poverty, the fact that we've got so many people with not enough money living in a country that has an unprecedented amount of wealth, that our main work in Circles is and continues to be changing hearts and minds about normalizing this condition of poverty. So we're really talking about what's required to move from a culture of poverty to a culture of prosperity. In the culture of poverty, what our country has done is set up a lot of programs that have a transactional relationship strategy to them. In other words, if you come into the office, I'm going to give you X amount of services, or if you go online and fill out these eligibility forms, you're going to get these kinds of things. And the programs have their solutions and ideas, and they prescribe them to people. And it's the culture of this kind of work has been pretty much allopathic. In other words, it's siloed funding streams providing X number of programs to move some part of the process down the road, but it hasn't been a comprehensive approach for most people. What Circles introduced back in the mid-90s was a transformational relationship, a community experience that allowed people over time to transform their relationship with money and with the community and with each other across socioeconomic class lines. It was also our process was always to co-design Circles with communities. In other words, what about this do you like? What are your strengths? Where are we going to put this? If you look at our 80-some locations right now, they're operated by very different types of organizations that have found a way to do this from their own initial set of strengths. In the culture of poverty, we're managing the problem, and in the culture of prosperity, we're leading change. We're showing that there's a way to do this. So 2018 was a big deal for us because in terms of our own coherence as an organization and as a membership, we found a way to start moving the big view idea into a larger programming opportunity called Poverty Reduction Labs. And in our clarity about what we're doing next as a big strategy, we made a deeper commitment to be in partnership with groups that would be in at least 300 counties, which is 10% of the roughly 3,000 counties in the country. We brought in some new states. We got into Alabama last year. I don't know if Wisconsin was brand new last year. It might have been. We were able to also begin seeing groups wanting to figure out how to expand into more locations. So we put quite a bit of formality into our thinking about what's the relationship between chapters and locations. Can we get the cost down? We brought the cost down for expansion, created some expansion materials. And one of the most exciting things was to have a foundation out of California show interest in us and invest in making some new materials, which will be coming out shortly here, that are brochures and some better marketing materials to explain to communities and people how to get involved with Circles. And they're also working now with some videos for training allies. So we're moving more and more towards providing more video support and structure to the process to make it the end game being it's just going to be a lot easier for people to get started with circles and less costly. Many of the chapters that are now expanding are beginning to see that if you've had the experience of being a coach or a coordinator, you may very well be the right people to train others in how to do circles. So putting on a new hat of being a master trainer are some of the things that people are thinking about now who have been staffing circles. And more people are making sure they have all 5 of the resource teams in place so that they're really, as a staff person, working through these teams as the model's been intended to do, again, freeing them up to be able to support new communities and interest from more locations within their own community. In terms of our results last year, they were excellent. This graph shows that from intake, for example, and as we know, we're looking at 1,549 households so far that are enrolled in the data system, and who have also completed a class. So if they've completed the class, their income was at $729, and now it's at $864 at the class completion. For the 10,067 households in the data system that have had at least 6 months of experience, their average started at $716 and moved to $996. And 740 households made it to 12 months and went from $710 to $10,093, or $1,093, so a 39% increase. And then for those that stayed for at least 18 months, the number went up again. And this is really the most critical information we've been putting out to inspire and support the movement with circles. It does show that if people stay in the program, they'll make more money. There are secondary indicators that we're collecting, as you know, and there has been an increase in education certificates, for example, 24% increase, which for the ones that at intake, we had 72 people that had certifications. Now there's 79. So these gains are small in numbers, but percentage-wise are significant, and it's something that we're tracking. And you can use this data as you wish to show that, you know, our attention to people is that they're making more earned income, and for many that means they have to go back to school and get either a new certification or a degree. In the area of employment, one of the biggest numbers is a drop in those who are unemployed. 329 people at intake said that they were unemployed, and after 12 months, 130 of them had found work, so it's a decrease of 40%, which is excellent. Part-timers, there were 178 people that indicated they were at part-time employment when they came in, and in 12 months, 202 had part-time employment, so there was a 13% increase. The biggest gain, however, was in full-time jobs. And again, these are people that have been in the program for at least 12 months, 210 at the intake, 312 at 12 months. We can actually give you those exact numbers. When we put together the impact report for 2018, they will include the exact numbers that we're using. I want to highlight at this moment, thank you for everybody who's been inserting the data into the data system and doing it timely. It allows us to get this data at a national level out to the general network and those that are funding us, but it also gives you locally the ability to do the same kind of presentation to your local funders. Also good strides made with housing. There were 25 people. There were 114 people owned a house when they came in and said that they owned a house. After 12 months, 25 more had also become homeowners. The decrease in temporary housing, which is it can be a version of homelessness or staying in someone else's home or whatever the conditions are. 127 people were said that they were staying in some other kind of arrangement, and that dropped by 45 more, so that was a 35% decrease. Anyway, these secondary indicators are going to influence, of course, the primary indicator of having enough earned income. So I'm going to turn this over to Kamatara to talk about specific upgrades that have been happening last year that we're going to be able to use this year.
Thanks, Scott. So one of the things that I'm looking forward to is the hot training that's at the end of the month. In fact, if you haven't registered yet for Florida, it's in your newsletter, The Loop. You can click on that and get registered with Gina. And the way that we're working this hot training is more collaborative, in that I'll be there to help with the Circles USA materials, but also Circles Orange County, who's hosting, has their coordinator, coach, and executive director helping as well. So with a collaborative hands-on training, we know that people are going to get the materials, I hope at a deeper level, very practical, and it should be very informative and inspirational. And of course, this is leading to, in the future, we hope to have regional training centers, which will make it easier to get training and spread it out more to the network, and also help with expansion. And of course, there's a renewed commitment to coaching calls. So as people renew their contracts, there's a fidelity call, and then 6 months out, there's a wellness call. And of course, you're welcome to call in between or email at any point that you need support. And Freed Camp is a great place to post questions and look for materials. And our monthly training calls, they're on the first Wednesday of every month, and unless there's a holiday, but pretty much the first Wednesday of every month. So that's a great time to hear from your peers in the network and get different ideas to all your questions. And then the monthly webinars, like right now, is the third Wednesday of the month, and we have Emily Hathaway, who's an amazing coach in Circles and also a life coach. She's doing half of our webinars, and then we'll have other topics that come up throughout the year. So stay tuned to The Loop for those. And I know that we're working on rolling out a new data system, which is going to really help with the input of data that we know is so important for our community and for our funders.
It's the same data system on the front end. It's just a more advanced reporting.
Ooh.
Right.
That's fantastic. Let me have Scott talk about that.
I don't want to scare people about the idea of a new data system. And Courtney, you might want to comment at this moment about this, but we're trying to make the data system easier for you to be able to turn around some reporting and get more accurate, more timely reports out to your peers.
So I should have typed upgraded system. Yes. Courtney, would you like to say something on that?
That is correct. We're inputting some new features so that you're going to be able to run reports on your system, similar to the Excel documents that we do during our data calls. And we're still working on this, but it's meant to have a lot of new features that I believe will be very beneficial to the chapters.
Excellent. Thank you, Courtney. And we're also working on a new website look, so that's happening in conjunction with some of our partners. And we've also updated the assessment guide, and we're working on updating the brochures. There's a new promotional materials that we might give to new chapters or people looking to become new chapters, called Lives Transformed, and it includes 4 Circles stories, which are, of course, the most powerful way to understand what Circles is all about. And as Scott already mentioned, we're working on updating and enhancing our ally training.
It's also a store.
Oh, and the e-store is up now too. So you know that you got your logins from Gina for your particular chapter, so you can get the products that your Circles products right there in the e-store.
All right, thanks, Kamatara. The SUHA Foundation and the Trover and Workman Family Foundations are supporting us on building out these new materials for expansion. So a big shout out to them and thank them for their support. And SUHA has also been rolling up their sleeves and been actively involved in the development of the new materials. So it's just easier to explain Circles to anyone who might be interested in opening up a new chapter or a location. The annual conference is coming up in Greenville, South Carolina, October 14th through the 17th, so please put that on your calendars and look forward to seeing everybody there. On the idea of expanding chapters, what we're going to be doing this year is developing a certification training for expansion. We are also in conversation with groups nationally and at statewide levels about partnering for expansion. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. We're looking at financial incentives for chapters to partner with us on the expansion of, and in many cases where we've begun putting together expansion plans, the chapters are receiving revenue to support the new locations. So if you're interested in expanding, let us know and we can start talking to you more formally about some things that we know would help. We're also looking at, we've been writing and co-writing proposals for people, with people about expansion, as well as the new idea we'll be talking about more today, which is poverty reduction labs. Speaking of that, I brought this up at the conference in April and have been talking with a number of you about what this idea is. This is just a very, at 80,000 feet, the idea is fairly simple. We're talking about poverty reduction teams comprised of any group of people or organizations that want to work with a specific group of people for enough time to be able to move through these 5 stages that anybody would have to go through in order to become more economically stable. So right now, the communities we're in tend to break these down into these silos, and then there are different people that are doing different things. But who's brokering people through the whole process? This poverty reduction lab structure makes it more likely that people will get all the support that they need in a way that is coordinated and comprehensive, so that they come out the other end of the process with more money and more stable money. When people commit to doing something like this, they inevitably start finding both the service gaps and the system barriers that become really problematic. Because Circles has, from the get-go, been really a poverty reduction team, we've identified things like the cliff effect, which for many legislators, lawmakers, and policymakers and agency heads that we've talked to, you know, it's a kind of brand new problem to them. What do you mean? I didn't realize it. It's that significant. Well, because we're not committed to getting people out of poverty. If we commit to that, then we will bump into these kind of problems. So this has been formally picked up now in Dorchester, Maryland, by the management board, the local management board for the county, and involves the mayor's office, the county manager, the Department of Human Services, several civic organizations have all, and the economic development folks are at the leadership table pulling together this new poverty reduction apparatus. Arrive Utah has also entered into a contract with us this year to begin looking at how poverty reduction labs can get set up inside of Utah. And Columbus, Georgia has also entered into a contract, and that's a community action agency with a large Head Start program, that an early Head Start, that would be working with us. We are also in supportive conversations with Greenville, Indianapolis, Merced, California, Pittsburgh, and maybe even your community later here, to look at what it would take to pull together these new ideas. And I think we'll just describe this a little bit more and then open it up for questions here when we get done with this explanation of the Poverty Reduction Lab. But in terms of what happened last year, a lot of the thinking about this got much clearer and more material put together. And this year, you know, we actually have a chance to start rolling it out. One of the things to understand is that since Circles is already a poverty reduction team, one of the roles that chapters are going to be playing now is co-designing adaptations of Circles for these different poverty reduction teams. So let's just take an example. Head Start has a parents council. Head Start wants to pull together a poverty reduction team. It already has certain supports in place. So then Circles turns around and says, let's see what we can do to bring what we know to your process and give you even better social capital resources here. And then let's take the information that we get through our Big View process and what you're going to get in terms of service gaps and system barriers, and work together with the poverty reduction planning team to come up with some solutions. One of the things I love about what we're up to next is we're partnering with Dr. Darcy Terrace out of Phoenix, who is has an organization called CQIU, so Continuous Quality Improvement. basically takes small improvements that can be done and moves people through a process of planning, doing these improvements, checking to see if they work, and then acting to scale. And these small little CQI processes really start to help us get better and better and better without overwhelming ourselves with too much. A lot of the feedback we've gotten over the years about circles is that it's a complex intervention with a lot of spinning plates. What we're now doing with CQI is just helping people, do this more systematically, slower, so you can go fast later, and only move forward to scale things once they have shown that it really is comfortable. The first round of it has been figured out, the first cycle. Circles USA was born out of an organization called Move the Mountain Leadership Center, and its main work in the 90s with the Annie E. Casey Foundation was to work with hundreds and hundreds of nonprofit leaders on a process called transformational leadership. Well, we have pulled it off the shelf last year and redesigned it to support the build-out of poverty reduction labs. And so if this piques your interest, we can certainly provide more information to everybody. We'll be blogging about some of this. I think we've already started blogging on some of these.
Third one's coming.
We've done 2 blogs on this already. So this map, if you will, is basically saying anyone that wants to create a change in the world must articulate the vision, align all the stakeholders that want to be a part of making that vision come alive. Everyone's got to learn something new to make it happen, and then it has to be embedded, not only in new practices and structures and policies, but a new generation of leaders have to be trained and supported to take the change forward. And the leader, him or herself, really needs to figure out, how can I become this change I'm talking about? So if you want to see people in more supportive community, are you giving yourself that experience? And if you want people to be financially stable, are you feeling that way? It's really asking ourselves to look at the change we want to see happen and then work to be that change ourselves. Our potential partners that I mentioned include the National Association of Counties. We've been in conversation with them about their agenda around addressing poverty. We've met with the staff from the National Governors Association to discuss their recommendations to governors about how to address poverty. AARP has reached out to us. I've been identified as one of 10 wellness champions that they're going to be promoting this year. So we're meeting, I'll be doing a speech in New Orleans in April with the largest aging conference that's out there. And at that meeting, we'll be building a plan of told about circles and the potential partnership, particularly with providing allies that might be available. If you have a relationship with your AARP chapter, please let us know, because we're right in the process now of telling the national office what they might do for us. So if you're interested in building a relationship with AARP or already have one, please let Gina know this, and we'll put that into the mix of the conversation. We're also working, as you know, at the last conference, Clarence Carter spoke, who's the head of TANF nationally. So there's been an ongoing conversation with him and consultants about the relationship between TANF objectives and circles. And we're also close in with the Community Action Partnership nationally, talking about ideas with them. So again, if you have a national partnership that you think would be important for us to have a conversation with, let us know, and we'll reach out, and we'll reach out to you as well and learn more about what that might look like. So I'm going to stop right now and just see if there are questions or comments that we can answer or talk about. And Gina, why don't you let us know if you're seeing any, because we don't have the chat line up.
I will. So far, nothing coming in.
Okay, can mean one of two things: we're being crystal clear, or we just need to keep talking until something gets sparked here.
We have a question from Jen Schmo. Can you talk a little more about CAP? The CAP relationship?
Sure. The Community Action Partnership is, first of all, Circles came out of Mid-Iowa Community Action. I was a member of the executive team for 7 years there, or the development team as we called it. And so it grew out of community action. It originally was transferred through community action to Missouri and Minnesota CAP agencies, some of them, and then it was spread. Today we've got community action at the lead of the poverty reduction process in Columbus, Georgia. They're the lead chapter in Greenville, South Carolina, also in Boulder, Colorado, Fayette County, Pennsylvania, and several places in Utah, including Provo, which launched a group called Arrive Utah that is supporting the whole state network of community action agencies. So Jeannie Chaffin is our liaison in DC. She was the former head of the Office of Community Services, has a contract with CAP. Denise Harlow is the executive director of CAP, and they're working with the Casey grant to provide a community of practice to CAP directors, of which we've been talking to Jeannie on a pretty regular basis about the potential overlap between what we're trying to do with the Transformational Leadership Program and Poverty Reduction Labs and the expansion of circles with the objectives that CAP has with the Casey grant. And Jen, if you've got more specific wonderings about that, just let us know. We can make a connection in any way that would be useful.
She said, okay, thanks, she will.
Okay. All right, Gina, anybody else?
Nope.
Okay, well, one of the things that we've been wondering about for some time now is how we define success. We're committed to the idea that there needs to be an end to poverty, and there has to be, as I said in the beginning, there's got to be a moral commitment to the idea that poverty is immoral. So when we say, the end of poverty, we're basically saying loud and clear that it's not okay anymore. Why keep tolerating this condition when it can be solved? So how do we talk about it? What is this? Are we using actual poverty rates or something else? And we're wondering if there can be a more fluid, individualized, and important metric to be thinking about and talking about. For example, this sentence came out in the year 2000, and we used it for the first several years in the precursor to Circles, which was a project in Ames, Iowa called Beyond Welfare. But we would say this is about everyone having enough money, meaning, and friends in their lives to thrive. And people choose their own goals around all three of those, and they build plans to have that be developed. So allies were given the same opportunity. Maybe you have enough money, but how you have a sense of meaning or friendship, that's probably why you're volunteering. You want to enhance those parts of your life. So I offer this up because it's resonated with new places that we've been talking to, particularly around the poverty reduction work. And the poverty rates, the tricky part about the poverty rates is that the forces that have to be corralled to get the poverty rate are often way out of our control. If your economy goes really good, poverty can go down. If something happens to the economy, it goes up. You might start by having a poverty rate at 15%, and things that we had nothing to do with or could not influence could happen, and suddenly it's at 16 or it's at 13. So what are we really saying here? What I'm suggesting is that what we're doing with Circles is bringing a mindset into the community that says, let's support people out of poverty, whatever we can do about that. And yes, it'll probably influence the poverty rates. The poverty reduction labs can have metrics around trying to get 10% to happen, and I think all that's fine. But you have to decide at some point how to hang your hat on this. And it seems to me that by having, at Circles USA level, this idea of getting activity in 300 counties is specific enough for us right now. We will be talking about what's the poverty rate and how many children are in poverty, and we can talk about the influence of Circles and a poverty reduction lab on that general population of people. I think it is important to show progress toward 200%. But let's just talk about this emerging economy for a minute. And I'm just putting it out there that we're in a very robust, fluid conversation about how we discuss what it is that we're trying to do. I mean, we can show an increase in money, but we could start thinking about what it looked like to have balanced budgets with savings, some savings, as a progress. In other words, will this emerging economy really provide us with enough 200% type jobs to be able to make that possible? We've had a lot of feedback from chapters that it's not going to happen in their community. They don't see these kind of jobs being that. Maybe you can get 8 or 10 or 15 people, but if you start moving this to scale, it's very difficult with the emerging economy. And so are we starting to think that maybe we need to figure out how to put more energy on reduced expenses, find ways of helping people find more activity with co-ops or more activity with a shareable economy? Who knows what the answers are here, but this is what we're really thinking about this year, and are looking for some input and feedback from you throughout the year on how we suggest we're doing what we're doing and why. One of the things I like about Enough Money Meeting and Friends is that it respects these variables of an emerging economy. And if we were to focus on inspiring and equipping communities to build sustainable economies that end poverty, what might change in our partnerships, our funding opportunities, the amount of people that might get around us? Does that change at all? Is it a better way of talking about the mission? Again, we haven't finished this discussion, so we're just opening it up to you now. We might actually start putting more effort on a sustainable local economy. It's interesting when you think about, well, here, I'll just show some more data. So when I think about this emerging economy, the things that concern me about it being favorable to our goal of 200% is the unprecedented rapid acceleration of artificial intelligence eliminating jobs. The globalization process is not slowing down. Automation is definitely not slowing down. In the last 10 years, the 11 million new jobs that we recovered from 2008's recession, only 1 million of these could be considered blue-collar or low-skilled jobs. The rest were all required more education, more certifications, more white-collar experience. And then, when we look at this data around the biosystems and the environment at large, does this emerging economy that we have, is it something that we want to amplify? And I just grabbed this data to show you. USA is ranked 12th out of 215 countries in terms of our CO2 emissions. We are by far the most influential promoter of a very high carbon economy. We're less than 5% of the global population, but we're using 25% of the fossil fuel resources in the world. I mean, think of the math here. It doesn't add up. China and India are trying to follow our lead, and they have 2.8 billion. We've only got 325 million. I don't know how many planets it actually would take for them to adopt our model completely, but it's way more than one. And so what's interesting is that the funders have also started to trend towards these exact same things. There was the GRANTSTATION as a group that founded by Cynthia Adams, and one of our local developers here in town was putting out her own newsletter with a blog that listed the issues that are attracting funding for next year. I mean, as in 2019, this year. Their top issue was addressing climate change. And the second thing that the funders are looking at is achieving what was just phrased. This is exact phrasing out of this blog. The #1 goal of eliminating poverty. So combining these two things, and one of my conversations with Jeannie, she too had been exposed to conversation earlier on last year that talked about anybody that can figure out the relationship between sustainability and the issues of poverty is going to be on the front edge of something important and significant. And when I think about the fact that so many people are coming in as volunteers with more than enough resources. Now they have to wrestle with this relationship that they've established with people that don't have enough resources. And maybe, you know, we turn things on their head and start noticing that circle leaders, if you've had the experience of living on less than, in a way it's a leadership role that might be informative to people that have more than enough. How can we live on a more respectful footprint while we sort out, you know, other types of resources that don't include oil and fossil fuel and the things that cause problems? So to be thinking about all this in this emerging economy, the idea of sharing, shareable economies, these are all complementary currencies. These are all things that I've been hearing about for the last 15 or 20 years. But it feels to me like the time is arriving where this is going to start accelerating in terms of people's interest and the availability to get funding to experiment with these ideas. And would circles be, you know, an ideal platform for figuring out alternative ways for people to get their needs met that include, of course, earned income, but bartering and whatever else might be appropriate. Well, where does this take us? You know, maybe the mission is going to shift to something that states sustainable economies. We definitely are going to continue promoting poverty reduction systems as kind of an alternative system to a poverty management system. And we're going to continue the promotion and expansion of circles so that they have enough money, meaning and friends. And again, these are just words that we're sharing with you right now, but we'd like to take another pause and just see what your thoughts are about this. Do you agree, violently disagree? I mean, please push back.
So Gina, do you see any questions in the chat box for us?
Yep, I do. I just have to unmute myself so you hear me. So this is kind of a long one. Jen from Wisconsin says, have you given thought to putting energy around educating the general public about how nonprofits are funded? I call it corporate runoff and leftovers. In Green Bay, we have millions of dollars being invested in developing our local business economy without thought to the kind of money nonprofits need to support the lives of the workforce, yet there's not room in the economic plan to support the pipeline of workforce. That was a mouthful. Whew.
Well, I completely agree with that assessment. You know, when you look at what we're doing, for example, in Dorchester, Maryland, and again, we're just at the planning table, but they have 600 jobs that in that county. It's a very small county population of, I think, 35,000, but 600 jobs have been identified as not being able to be filled because of a qualified workforce. And they've identified poverty as the primary cause of the qualified workforce issues. So, you know, suddenly you see the nonprofit community being asked to be a workforce development support system for businesses that either fold up and move out, you know, which is a problem for local government, as well as the businesses. So I do think that the nonprofit system should see itself in the business of qualifying people for the workforce. And definitely circles should see ourselves in that particular way. So when you ask, you know, how do we get funded, it's the right question. Do we start looking at getting workforce development contracts? Do we start looking at straight to employers and saying, you know, give us a donation if we were to create a direct pipeline to your front door with qualified workers, and then maybe we provide post-placement and advancement supports while they're working through your company's ladder of opportunities. But I don't see any reason why we couldn't be seeing ourselves as a potential contractor for workforce development strategies. I don't know if that gets at it, Jen, but I do think often nonprofits are asked to address what can't be solved by government and by business, and to do it on the cheap.
Julie lists, success also must include increasing the poverty IQ, which increases motivation for ending poverty. Circles Grand Rapids defines poverty IQ as the level of factual understanding of an individual, organization, community, or nation of the complexity of poverty that includes root causes, the impact of the experience of poverty on individuals, the family, and the greater community, and the systemic barriers that prevent those experiencing poverty from lifting themselves out of it. They're exploring metrics to measure the poverty IQ.
That's awesome. Well, we would definitely love to hear more about that, Julie. And if you've got any initial materials about this that you're using, we'd love to work with you on those. I agree. I think if the IQ goes up to some kind of critical tipping point, that's when we really start getting some bigger solutions going.
Jen Schmo replied, yes, she totally agrees with what you said, Scott.
The first time or the second time?
The second time.
Okay.
And then Bruce Forbes says, I like the new vision you're putting out there. It gets him thinking.
Okay. Well, the other thing that I want to just mention here is that, you know, there are simultaneous strategies that chapters can be pursuing right now. You can, I think it's very difficult to keep a demonstration chapter, one single chapter going past, let's say, I think our history is showing that at 5 years you could be, you know, it can be tough because it's not new and it seems small and there's a bit of fatigue around funding it. Well, I think it's important to think about what is next. So is it more locations? Do you create more locations, more classes? Do you want to start laying the framework down to poverty reduction labs? You know, we're putting transformational leadership underneath both of these ideas right now, but it's important to get a new shared vision going. And you've got people that have high IQs around poverty because they've been in relationship with people for enough time to have transformed their own perceptions. They may very, very well be people you want to pull together with circle leaders and allies and your resource team people and have a discussion about what's next. And then once that shared vision gets cooked well enough, you can go out and I think get renewed interest in funding. And I think the more we can ask allies and resource team members to consider investing both time and treasure, in other words, their own donations, the better we get at that, the more stable our work's going to be. Because it's difficult to keep government funding going. The philanthropic community, you must go back every 2 to 3 years with the new vision, or you won't continue to get their funding. And there may be a lot of opportunity around building a stronger friends and fundraising process on the quarterly events where you have 5 meetings a month. On that 5th meeting 4 times a year, it could be turned into, let's really do shared vision work and let's do some fundraising once we've got that next shared vision. And again, we can help you with these things. We've got ideas and some materials that I think are provocative and helpful to get excited about what's next. Okay, another question?
Yep, Scott, actually it's more of a comment from Bruce. He said we may want to focus on shifting from focusing on reducing poverty to increasing prosperity. Yeah. That is more inclusive language for the entire community rather than helping just a portion of the community, in parentheses, those in poverty.
So if we did that and inverted the conversation, I think I wrote something 2 years ago on this. I'm pretty sure I did. We can dig that out. But I think it's a good point. Let's just say your poverty rate's 16%. Well, your prosperity rate could be considered 84%, except the 16% thing is baloney. So we probably could better say, you know, we've got about a 70% success rate going on with our prosperity rate's probably closer to 70 to 75%. And if prosperity included having enough savings when you need it, then we're right down to about 50% in this country. 50% of the households report they could not come up with $400 if they had to. That's an incredible statistic. So yeah, what I like about that, Bruce, is that it leads people in a more positive direction of what we're trying to create. And it does give you an opportunity to talk about what the heck is prosperity. And is it really prosperity if people are upside down with debt? They might have a good job. You might get 200% of your poverty level covered in income, but in the terms of managing of that money, are you upside down with loans? Are you overspending with credit? Do you have nothing in savings? How is that being prosperous? All right. Anything else, Gina?
Nope, other than Julie said, they'll let us know it's very early in their exploration.
Okay, great. You know, there's a study that's called Attributes of Wealth, and it's a way of determining how people understand how people get wealthy. And there was discussion about using this as a way of testing before and after results with allies. How did they assign the whole idea that people get financially well off or not? And I think if I remember, it had something to do with whether you're more leaning towards bootstraps or benefits. Do you think that, or is it just something that, you know, that system has to change so that there's more people that can make more money, or do individuals have to change? Where's the emphasis or responsibility? We assumed that over time, people's ideas would move more toward the center of being both and. But it may be another way of determining the IQ of people's sense of poverty and the reasons, the causes for it. Attributes of wealth, I think, is the particular thing I'm thinking about. We wanted to pose these questions to you to see if there's any last minute or last conversational items you want to, you know, where do you see you heading this year? What would you need to be able to make that next step? And what particular strength that you have that you've cultivated that you would say, well, it seems kind of unique that we know how to do this. We'd like to know that, especially for the upcoming conference, so that we might consider reaching out to you for a particular workshop on that. So let me just leave these 3 questions with you, and Gina, let me know if anyone has any thoughts or responses.
Will do. The other thing too, we'll send out an email in February asking for, you know, breakout topics and items of interest for the conference.
Okay. Well, in closing on my end, I just want to thank again everybody for all the work you're doing locally. It's an amazing pioneering work that you've been doing, and I'm just always grateful and appreciative of the work that leads to the insights, that leads to momentum that can finally start changing some of these conditions in our country. So many thanks to all of you for doing all of that great work. Yeah.
And I'd like to thank Scott for his time today and sharing his vision with us, and an amazing font of knowledge and facts and information that comes together. So thank you for sharing.
That's really just my mother's opinion about things.
Oh,
it's not a generally held view.
Well, let me phrase that. In my experience in working with Scott Miller, he remembers a lot of amazing facts and statistics, and is very well read and knows what's going on in the network. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the vision that there is a direction, but it's an open vision that we're trying to take in best practices and find the best way to make a world that works for everyone. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And we look forward to whatever thoughts you have next about what we brought up. And we would like to know if you think these ideas are worth adopting and moving forward. So any feedback would be helpful. Thank you.
So to bring us to a close, the recording, of course, will be made available shortly, as will the PowerPoint. And you can always get a hold of Gina or me, Komatara, if you have any questions or suggestions. Thank you so much for attending Circles USA January 2019 webinar.
The recording will probably be available within 5 to 7 days, everybody.
Thanks, Gina. Yep. And thank you, Courtney, for working behind the scenes. Much appreciated.
No problem.
Have a good day, everybody.